Yeah, well, nice to be here at Porterville College. I think I was here like in 2005. Most of you, what, high school? No, not, probably not even that. Okay, so anyway, yes, today I'm going to present my documentary, Soldados, Chicanos in Vietnam, excuse me. Loosely based on my first book, Soldados, Chicanos in Vietnam. There's a story about 19 Chicano Vietnam veterans from Corcoran. They could be from anywhere wherever Chicanos live. But the reason I put this book together is, for the most part, and I don't want to go into the polemics of what Chicano means, Mexican. There's a lot of names for this group if you really think about it. Hispanic, Latino, Mexican-American, Mexican, Chicano, Spanish-speaking, Spanish surname. I mean, make up my mind, you know? So it's difficult, and I know it's confusion, but I'm not going to go into that right now. But I prefer the word Chicano, and now we got to say Chicano, Chicana, okay, because of gender grammar. And there's some problems there between the Spanish and the English. Nonetheless, I put this book together because I was teaching college back in 1980s at the Anza College over there in Cupertino, and I began to read a lot of books on the Vietnam War. And for the most part, it shouldn't have surprised me, Chicanos were not included in this literature for the most part. And if they were, it was basically, you know, in the background, just like those Western movies where they have a little Mexican with a donkey in the background, something of that sort, you know. So I just took it upon myself to start interviewing those veterans from my hometown. But as I said, they could be from San Antonio, they could be from New Mexico, and that way it doesn't make that much of a difference. So that's the reason I concentrated on this group. But then again, as for my experience, my life experience, I've never had such racial solidarity as I did in Vietnam up to this day. Never. I have not felt that solidarity with people from other ethnic groups. However, there were in Vietnam a lot of problems, especially with the blacks and the whites, and within the white ethnic group themselves. How many of you have seen that movie Platoon? Have you seen that movie? There is a conflict too between kind of like the right wing and the more liberal guys, right? Regardless of ethnicity, or as we used to call them, the juicers and the potheads. Okay, you know, that's one reason I'm not worried about being hired for teaching, because I can, you know, we're all adults here, so I can go into some of these things that, for the most part, aren't usually dealt with in classes, or some of these issues. A lot of drug use. The military was actually falling apart after, I would think, 1968, when Nixon came in 69. It's very interesting what was going on there, because they started pulling out peace with honor. But that's when the United States lost half of the majority men. I think there was like 10 women killed. The majority, 58,000 guys killed, and about 300,000 wounded. Okay, about 3 million served in Vietnam from, I would say 1963, 64 to about 1973. So we had these problems within the military. I mean, can you imagine fighting, and you're supposed to be fighting to, you know, to the death sometimes. Well, actually all the time when you started fighting, they weren't playing around. And they're pulling out already, okay? They're pulling out. So where's the morale? What's the war about? You know, you really think about it. So this created a lot of problems for the military. For example, I interviewed one Marine where he says this: Marines were killing each other, especially the black and the white Marines. I mean, not everybody, of course, but remember I told you, I haven't felt such racial and ethnic solidarity, but that was mostly out in the jungles. Out in the base areas, it was very different. Especially a lot of drugs, a lot of heroin, okay? So we have it was very conflicting time. There was very difficult times. And just as here in the United States, we had the anti-war movement, we had the Chicano movement, we had the American Indian movement, the students' movement in terms of getting ethnic studies, the women's movement, and the nascent gay movement began during this time. Okay, and big cultural changes in the society and worldwide, but that affected the soldiers themselves. And one of the things that is very different now in terms of these wars, and many things that are different, but one of them was that there was the draft. I'm sure if they had a draft, I think there'd be a lot of people protesting like the Iraq and Afghanistan, let me assure you, okay, if they had a draft. And I hear sometimes people say, well, you know, I think if they did have the draft, which I don't think I would not support it, but if they did, I think this time they ought to start drafting the richer people first instead of the poorer people. Read a book called a book by Chris Appy, A-P-P-Y, called Working Class War. He is a Harvard professor and a colleague of mine, and he goes really into depth of what was going on in terms of the draft. But then again, you make up your own mind, I mean, for these things. Just don't believe what I say, or you have critical thinking and critical analysis of many of these things. But nonetheless, and then of course, war also can be very romantic, right? You know, you want to be a hero. You know, we grew up in this generation with Audie Murphy. I don't know if you've ever seen him, and To Hell and Back, and Gary Cooper, Sergeant York, and John Wayne, and all of these different things. So we thought, many of us, that war was like the movies, okay? And then patriotism, and especially for Chicanos, we're still considered foreign. You know, I'm in the pre-productions of making an independent feature movie based on my book, Dogs from Illusion, about 3 guys that go to Vietnam. And that one, if I have my druthers, I'm going to call it a domestic foreign film. Okay, because we're Chicanos, we're domestic, but yet we're still considered foreign. Okay, and some of us, not everyone, but some of us speak Spanish, a foreign language in California. Spanish is foreign, but it's not foreign, socially speaking. But yet we're looked upon as being foreign or ahistorical, not a history at all. Basically, it's one of everyone just crossing illegally right now, and that's the way everyone's has gotten here, and that's not true. There's a lot of, but it's very complicated, but we have not been taught that history. But in saying this does not mean that we should be separatists. We all live together in the same society, but I think it just promotes ethnic understanding from within the different groups. And none of this, shall we say, I don't believe in making people feel guilty or it's their fault or any of that. None of that, no. But we need to understand honestly and critically of how we've all come together here in this society. Okay, with that, I have an hour, right? We have an hour?
Until 12:30.
Okay, 12:30. This film was about 26, 28 minutes long, and then I can take questions and answers after that. This is not the PBS, well, this is not the one that was shown on, this is the same one, just a little bit different version. We don't have all the PBS stuff on it. But my friend Sonia Rhee, who was Korean, she's the one that began this project. She is from New York. And she's the one that began this project, about 12 years ago. So it's about these 5 guys from Corcoran. I'm one of them. I'm one of the characters. And it starts out that I'm in the middle of a big cotton field there, west of Corcoran, southwest of Corcoran, in Boswell. How many of you heard of Boswell, that big land company? I'm out in the middle of the cotton fields, and it begins from there. And my politics are really to the left. And there's another one, you'll be able to identify him. He is very much to the right. Okay, he's a retired command sergeant major of the Army. So, you know, he calls me a communist and I call him a fascist. Good thing we both like to drink a few beers once in a while. Okay, but that can create problems too. But I just felt that I had to, it's not just because I have certain political beliefs, I feel that I have to show what samples of what our communities are like, and just because I disagree with him does not make any difference. It needs to be shown, okay? And then we all have a lot of contradictions. There's a guy on here who became a former Marine who became a prison guard at the Corcoran prison. But as you can read his story here in this book, he did some time in prison in Vietnam, and then he became a prison guard over here. Okay, so it's kind of interesting. We have a lot of contradictions. There's a lot of things I could talk about here. One of the things is what it's like. How many of you read? What was it, about 2 weeks ago, where that guy in Afghanistan killed 16 people? Well, there's one guy here that in my book, but it's not official because I know many of these guys. We've known each other since we were kids. It's unofficial. He killed, I think, 50, 60 kids and women in a village. But that was like, I mean, not everybody did that, okay? I have to make sure. I make that clear. However, that was going on. What's 40, 50 people? Drop in the bucket. You know, if you look at it, it depends on the estimate, but close to, depends. And it's very difficult to get these numbers, but I've seen different numbers from 2 to 3 million people died during this conflict in Indochina, in Cambodia, Laos, and mostly Vietnam. Okay? So, but as Joseph Stalin, the Soviet leader, said, one death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic. Okay, so he said, well, they say maybe 2 million, maybe 3 million. I say, wait a minute, what do you mean you just throw in 1 million people? I mean, you know, or that. And for me, what mostly got to me the most was the children. The children are the ones who die in these wars, where it's in Iraq and Afghanistan. These wars is the children and the civilian deaths and the suffering. So that's why I became really anti-war. And I think many times we become desensitized to wars. And so, but as I told you, you see that I do think that it's fair to let other people speak their minds of what they think about the war. And one of the things here is that in Porterville, I read more than once, it's been a while, but Porterville had the highest casualty rate per capita in the nation. Okay, I think it was something like 35 guys from Porterville got killed. Does anyone know? 40. Yeah, that's for the size of the town. So high, I think they have the largest per capita death rate in the nation. So as I said, read that book, Working Class War. And it'll give you an idea of what was going on during this time in terms of who served in the military. And not only who served in the military, but how well you did in school also mattered. Whether you're going to be in the infantry or you're going to be a clerk or, you know, communications or some MOS, military occupational specialty that was going to require more, you know, mathematics and reading and writing or whatever it is. So that was also very important. Are there any questions? Any questions whatsoever? Yes.
Would you say more about racial solidarity out in the jungle and how you were talking about different races being solid together?
Yes. Yes. I guess Willie, my friend Willie, he puts it. When I was there, everybody was the same. Equal. Everybody looked after each other equally. They were thinking about survival. So that kind of, you know, it becomes a really group solidarity there. You all depend on one another, okay? And also, you know, growing up in Corcoran and growing up in this society, the psychological domination that one culture places upon another, in this case, I remember I started school. I did not speak one word of English, but my family's been here on my father's side in California for 100 years, and my mother's family's been in Texas since that was Mexico, okay? But I didn't speak English. So they would punish us, you know, if you caught you speaking Spanish, and on the school grounds, there were actual rules. You could not speak Spanish on the school grounds. And they would, you know, they caught you, you make 100 spit wads, or put you in a closet, solitary confinement, right? And this is very detrimental to a child. I remember we came home late from working in the grapes in Napa. It was 1956, around December. And I came to school. The first day of school was the last day for Christmas vacation. So they brought in Santa Claus, and I freaked out. I thought he was a monster, right? You think about it, wow, it's Santa Claus. What is this? You know, it was like, because we still lived out in the camps. That's when the mechanization was taken over, and they needed less workers. So after that, we moved to the city, Corcoran. But it was going like from one country to the next, right there in Corcoran, outside the city limits. It was like going to a foreign country, okay, because we were used to something else. And actually, there was one brilliant teacher that some friends have told me. I never had him, but he was brilliant. For those of you who are in psychology, if you have read B.F. Skinner's behavioralist type of psychology, what he would actually do is have the students stick their tongue out, and then he'd wrap them on the tongue with a ruler. That's brilliant, very, very, very intelligent to do that. In terms of the language, and we still have this language problem. There's English only, but I noticed that when I was in Vietnam, they drafted a lot of Puerto Rican soldiers from Puerto Rico, and those guys did not speak one iota. I mean, some of them, the ones from New York and some other ones, of course, but the ones out in the country guys, they did not speak one iota of English, and but they didn't have English only there. And I was actually the translator for some of these guys. It was a pretty good situation to be in, because you could kind of manipulate things, you know. I mean, not to their detriment, but, you know, anyway, so it was very interesting. Yes?
What was the gold medal for?
Oh, the Bronze Star.
Bronze Star.
Oh, I don't know. You know, there's different versions of it, the official version and my version. My version, I was trapped. I couldn't go anywhere, so I had to start fighting, and that's what they gave it to me for. But they said I saved the other guy. I guess I could have left him, but I didn't. Okay, yeah. And also, when they cut that part, when I told you I got hurt with when I got the shrapnel in my eye, well, it really hurt a lot. And that's when I went into shock, and I started thinking just as I said. But they left out the last part. When I started coming to, because the medic kept talking to me, when I started coming to, I thought about God. You know, well, first of all, I thought about anybody got shot from the head up, I mean, from the waist up, died with AK-47. So I thought I had gotten shot. So I didn't, and then the next thing I started negotiating, labor negotiations with God. And then the next one is I started thinking about my mom. And when I really started coming to, I thought about enchiladas. I'm serious. It was because there is such a thing as comfort food in psychology, and I've talked to psychologists, and that's very common for people to do these things. But you can see I overdid it with the enchiladas too when I came home. Yes, I'll give to you.
I was just saying, I was going to tell you that my brother was a prisoner of war in Vietnam, and when he came back, they called him a baby killer. He spit on his face, and it makes me think. It brought tears to my eyes because my brother, he fought a lot over there. And he came back. He was hiding. I was a little kid. I was 5 years old, and he would hide it on the closet. And my mom would tell him, she would ask him, "Where's your brother?" And I said, "In the closet playing," you know, because I didn't know. But now he can't. To this day, he can't really speak about it. He you know, and it's ugly.
It's very difficult to deal with civilian life. There is a book called, wow, I forget, it's been a while since I read that book. It's War and the Soul. War and the Soul, by a psychologist, and deals with war. And I couldn't believe it when I read this book. 100,000, this is about maybe 8 years ago that I read this book. Probably the book's about 10 years old. 100,000 Vietnam veterans have killed themselves since the end of the war. Okay? So, and then with Afghanistan and Iraq. And one thing that's really different now, but at the same time remains the same, many things, as Charles Dickens would say, more women. are serving now in the military. More, even though they have supposedly no direct combat military occupational specialties, that doesn't make any difference when you're in wars like especially Iraq and Afghanistan. Even though may not be the infantry or artillery, but they are in the mix. So that's also, since the military is basically a male occupation and culturally, so it becomes that much more difficult for the women and coming home and reentry. Yes.
From your personal experiences in Vietnam, what was the environment like when you served over there?
Well, see, I was there in 1970, so it was very different from what I understand, because I have spoken to a lot of Vietnam veterans. I have studied the war. Then, of course, I have my own personal experiences, but that's very limited.
What's the climate like?
You mean social climate or?
Environmental climate over there.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it was very hot, very, very hot. But we'd also work in the Central Highlands. We'd climb up those mountains. We were like billy goats. And it'd get like, especially in the monsoon, 38, 40 degrees. And then we'd come back into the valleys, and it was like 105, 110 with all the humidity. So, it was really difficult in terms of that. But also the environment, the destruction of the environment, Vietnam, both north and south, is a little bit, maybe say 90%, no, it's about, it's almost the size of California, just for you to get an idea, shall we say, in terms of geography. Maybe a little bit bigger, but not much larger. So they dropped more bombs on Vietnam, more tonnage of bombs the United States did than all of World War II. Okay, so you can imagine what that does to the environment. And then some brilliant guys came out, or some company, I forget, Dow, I believe, or some of these other chemical companies were supplying Agent Orange, defoliants. They were trying to kill the jungle. Can you imagine? So the enemy couldn't hide. And that's still a big, big problem. My friend who called me up about 6-7 months ago, I live in San Jose, and he called me up, and Ruben Romero, and he says, man, I haven't seen you in 42 years. I was not in Vietnam with him, but we were in training in Fort Ord at the time. And he called me up, and he said, man, you sure did get fat. What happened to you? And I said, oh, well, a lot of enchiladas, man, and Taco Bell and stuff. So anyway, so he said, I got cancer from Agent Orange. That's what he said. He told me, he got bone cancer. And so he says, I want to talk to you. Can you come over? I want you to print my story. So he never called me back. He died about, I think, a month later. One of my other friends. So it gets to him. I interviewed another guy, Tony Villalobos. I interviewed him right before he died. This was about 15 years ago. I videotaped him. He was dying from Agent Orange. I think he was getting something like $100 a month from the government. Okay, so we get these type of problems with these type of things. Yes, and it's difficult. Like where Mike, well, he calls himself Miguel. Now, Miguel, he's very interesting. He's not here to defend himself, but yeah, that's good. So I'll just talk about him. But he has a lot of relatives. Maybe that sometimes it gets back to the grapevine. But he's a very interesting guy because we used to call him Mike when we were growing up. Now he wants to be called Miguel, sister, right? And he's against bilingual education. So it's very, yeah, he's against. He says you should only speak English in schools and things of that sort. But anyway, yeah, we have many difficult problems with soldiers. Oh, but what I was going to say, yeah, we had these problems with people throwing tomatoes at you, which according to some people say never happened. But I believe, Mike, it did happen to him. But what is that bad? Yes. But is it bad when the Border Patrol stops you and says, where are your papers? Huh? This is the government telling you now. Which one is worse? Okay, I just wrote an article. If you email me, at choosemahouse.com. My email's on there. CHUSMA, choosemahouse.com. Choosema basically means the rabble, the mob. In other words, I got the rabble press, and I will send you an article that was published for Veterans Day. The Voz de Guadalupe is the name of the newspaper in Austin, Texas. And I occasionally write for the newspapers, op-eds, and this one was picked up by them. And what's going on, like in Arizona and in Alabama, where they're passing these laws where the police, not just the federal agents, but the police can stop you for reasonable suspicion of being illegal. So how do you know? How do you know when you profile these people? Okay, like you can't tell. I mean, we're a very complex group. Some of us, I have friends who are from New Mexico or my mom's family who have been here way before this was the United States. And then we have people coming over from Mexico as we speak. And then sometimes some of the older siblings in a family maybe have been born in Mexico, and then the other ones are born here. Or one parent is born in Mexico, the other parent is born here. So it's really different. Then there's some people, my mom has cousins from Texas, and they're like in their late 70s, who don't even speak English. One of them, Tita, only speaks one word. She says water, and that she means the ocean. Okay, so, but she, so it's really difficult. And as a matter of fact, my friend from Las Cruces, New Mexico says he knows this one guy whose brother's a border patrol, a Chicano border patrol. Oh, and here's the other thing. Half of the border patrol are Latinos. Okay, so it's a very, very, very delicate and complicated situation in which we find ourselves in. But he told me that one of the border patrol guys, the Chicano guys, is, got into his civilian clothes from work and when it was going home, and he was stopped by the border patrol, right? Or Ricardo Sanchez, one of the main generals, one of the principal generals during the Iraq War from Texas, they'll stop him too. Okay, so we have these contradictions and very emotional things that issues that are going on. So, but now here is the police who can stop you. Hey, come here, give me your papers. What do you mean? What do you want? What do you want, man? What am I doing? Suspicion of burglary, or even then they can, that ethnic profiling and stuff. But this is just for your papers. Now the police can do that. Okay, that creates a lot of problems now, and yet. Yes, that puts us in a very interesting situation, okay? Especially as veterans, they say, you can, if you go try to enroll your grandkids or your kids, for the younger veterans, in school, you got to show papers. Where's your citizenship? And that means I got to be carrying a passport. But yet you go fight for freedom, which you have freedom of movement, you can do what you want, but then you can't do this. So it's a very interesting situation. And many times it's Chicanos ourselves are within the group that support that. They don't see it, they say, well, it's those guys, not me. It's those people over there, those undocumented. They're the problem, not me. But they don't understand that because of historical precedent, we are still considered one people, okay? And there is, so as I said, that's something to really think about. To me, that's an affront to my personal freedom, okay? Where you have to be producing papers just for walking down the street, okay? And then you went to go fight, right? My dad, another thing, my father, who never saw this documentary because he died right before that, he was released, and he is a World War II veteran, and right now I am in the process of returning the flag to Japan. I'm going to meet with the Japanese consulate, I believe, next week. Returning the flag that he got from a dead Japanese soldier. And it has the names of 10 Japanese soldiers, because I had it translated, from the city of Kyoto. And I want to return it back to their families as a gesture of peace, because, you know, this war just doesn't get as far as I'm concerned. I don't care what the arguments are. As far as, of course, they're very lengthy, but I really, you know, I would never thought I would say this. In other words, I'm a peace creep. That's what we used to call it. You're a peace creep because you're against wars. But anyway, this is all the time we have. And I know this sounds tacky, but I do have books for sale. And they're $10 for you guys. So I feel like I've just been giving an infomercial. And I also have, for free of charge, since we ran out of DVDs, VHSs, if you want one. You can have these for at no charge.
And
Okay.
Yes, give them a big hand.
Thank you. Thank you. Very nice audience.